When replacing the front strut, you will first need to safely raise and support the vehicle, as well as remove the brake caliper and disc. Please follow the link provided at the end of this video for additional assistance with those tasks. With the cable disconnected from the caliper and the brake sensor, make sure that the wheel speed sensor and brake sensors are unplugged from their connector, green arrow, then remove the bracket entirely by unbolting it. The shock, yellow arrow, is held onto the wheel carrier, blue arrow, by a long bolt that is integrated into the sway bar drop link, green arrow. Remove the bolt, sway bar drop link, and then the shock should be free to be pulled out of the wheel carrier. An impact wrench is a very handy tool for both removing and installing shocks. The tool allows you to tighten nuts without having the shock shaft rotate. The 3 nuts that hold the front shock to the tower are shown by yellow arrows. Mark the position of these nuts prior to removal. You want them to be in the same spot when you put them back on. The yellow arrow in the photo shows the bolt that needs to be loosened in order to gain enough clearance to lower the shock and clear the edge of the fender. You don't need to remove the bolt, simply loosen it so that the arm can rotate a bit more than is possible through the deflection of the rubber bushing. Don't retighten this bolt until the car's tires are back on level ground and the suspension is fully loaded. In the lower right is shown a new bearing installed in a new front strut mount. With the wheel carrier supported by your jack, lower it down so that you have enough clearance to rotate the assembly out from under the fender. Then pull on the shock to remove it from the wheel carrier, green arrow. Watch out that you don't accidentally scratch your paint. Use a good set of spring compressors and compress the spring. Then use a hex socket to hold the shaft of the shock as you tighten the nut and clamp down the entire assembly. In order to get the springs compressed enough to be placed on the shock, you will need a spring compressor like the one shown in the upper left. When the assembly is clamped down with the locking nut, then carefully release the tension on the spring compressor and remove them. When replacing shocks, I recommend installing all new parts. Shown here is the new front shock, A, a new strut bearing, B, a new lock nut, C, a new front strut mount, D. Your Bilstein shock should come with a beveled washer on the shaft, green arrow. This diagram shows the installation of a new front shock and how all the bits and pieces fit together. These new Bilstein shocks came with a tapered washer that needs to be fitted to the shaft prior to assembly. The shock bellows, the spring bumper stop, the cup washer, the foam insulator, the upper strut bearing, and the strut mount cup and the wash nut are all shown installed here. When reinstalling the shock, don't forget to replace all of the wiring, harnesses, and grommets that you removed. The insert shows the beveled washer that you needed to install before putting the shock together. If you haven't done it, stop and do it now. Shown here are the 15mm nuts that hold the upper rear strut mount in place on a 996 convertible, green arrows. You may need to remove some of the sound deadening material in order to access it. On coupe models, the upper strut mount is accessible through a small panel behind the rear seats. Disconnect the sway bar end link from the sway bar. Hold the 17mm nut on the inside of the sway bar link, as indicated by the green arrow, while removing the 15mm nut on the outside, yellow arrow. Counter hold the 18mm shock bolt, purple arrow, while turning the 18mm nut, green arrow. Once removed, you may need to use a drift to drive the bolt out of the mounting hole. Once out, pry the lower strut up and out of the control arm. Installation is the reverse of removal. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another video in this series.